Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first show of Evolution Revolution radio station. This is Carlos Cruz, CEO and President of the Guiding Principles. And today for our first show, we have a special guest, and he is Ken Snyder, Executive Director of the Shingo Institute. And today we'll be having several topics for discussion. But before we go on, I'd like to allow Mr. Snyder to please present himself and tell us a little bit about the Shingo Institute and what his role is as the Executive Director.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm happy to be here with you for your inaugural kickoff podcast webinar for Evolution Revolution. The Shingo Institute, let me start there. The Shingo Institute was started 32 years ago. It's a program within the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I am the fourth executive director during that 32-year time period. At first, the Shingo Institute really only did the Shingo Prize, for which it's probably most famous for. But after several years of administering the Shingo Prize and noting the difference between organizations that kept getting better and organizations that after receiving the Shingo Prize deteriorated and their performance deteriorated, led us to do a bunch of research into what caused more sustainable improvement efforts and improvement efforts that ultimately failed. And that led to developing as we developed a new model around that to help assess and award sustainable improvement. It led to a lot of people asking questions about how can we be more like that? And that led to us developing some curriculum, which is good for a university to do. And when we launched the curriculum, that became an extremely popular thing. And so we got more into, we now do a lot more work around delivering education than we do around just administering the prize. So we still administer the prize, we do education, we do research, and we also recognize great organizations, primarily at our conferences that we have, but also through showcase events and other activities like that. Personally, I got involved with Shingo starting in probably 2008, 2009 time period. I went through the training and became an examiner. I just joined the faculty at Utah State after 30 years in industry. And in industry, I practiced lean. Going back to my roots in business, I started my career working for a Japanese company and spent over a decade working there and learned basic Kaizen things. We called it TQC and Kaizen. Those were the key phrases we used within the Japanese company. But getting involved with Shingo was great for me because it was like going back to my roots. I enjoyed becoming a Shingo examiner. I was put on the board, then later became chairman of the board, and then had the opportunity to take over as executive director when the previous executive director had to leave. So I've enjoyed being involved with Shingo in many different roles, and it's, to me, like I said, it's like coming back home. So there's a little bit about me.
Excellent, excellent. And one thing that is to take note of is that the Shingo model itself has evolved and has grown. And just this last year, ending of last year, introduced a new module, which is the systems module. And I know that took a lot of work to put together. Can you tell us a little bit about that new module and why is it so important to the Shingo model itself? Uh,
Let me do that in the context of our ongoing curriculum development. As we learn new things from our research and from seeing the best of the best out in industry, that to us is constantly forcing us to improve how we teach and improve how we assess what is excellence. So if we go see something that is new and different and better than anything we've ever seen before, that changes the bar of how we evaluate what is a Shingo Prize recipient organization and what isn't. Because now we know you can do something even better than we thought it could be done. And the same is true for our curriculum. We're constantly revising it as we see better ways to teach certain principles and help people understand. And not just the principles, but we found that the biggest struggle that organizations had in making their improvements sustainable was not only creating the right kind of culture, which was key, but also how do you reinforce that culture through making it easy for people to do the right thing and harder for them to do the wrong thing. And that's done through the management systems. And if you don't create your systems in such a way that you're making it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing, then what we find is people will give up and they don't do the ideal behaviors that you want them to do because it's just too hard. It's just too hard and it's not easy for them to do that. And so we started doing research into systems a few years ago and then developed this workshop. We launched it last year and it's just been really well received out in industry because people are recognizing, yeah, this is something we need to be doing. We need to be looking at our systems and seeing if we've got all of the right elements in them, that they're accomplishing the purpose for which the system should be accomplishing and so on. And it's a great workshop for people to really get to nuts and bolts of implementation.
Excellent, and that goes hand in hand with the quality that's been delivered. I can tell you, I took that course, and it's a very interesting course. It does complete the piece of the puzzle, and I'm sure that as the Shingo model continues to evolve and to continue to mature and look at excellence as the northern light, it'll continue to grow. Um,
I should note one thing. I didn't mention our namesake, but we are named after Shigeo Shingo, who was the Japanese industrial engineer who helped Toyota develop the Toyota production system. And he never worked for Toyota other than as a consultant, but he worked for a consultant for them from 1955 or so to about 1982. So he spent many years training Toyota managers. I've met several dozen people who took his workshops while he was working with Toyota, and I've heard lots of stories of places where Shingo went and was involved with the management there. I am absolutely sure that if we weren't continually trying to improve our curriculum and our way of doing the Shingo Prize, that he would be really angry at us for having his name and not doing that.
that's fair to say. That's fair to say. Very good. Well, I'd like to jump into our first topic of discussion for today, and it has to do with I would say, I think it's the first Shingo conference that was virtual, if I'm not mistaken, and it just concluded this week. And I want to say that it was a very interesting experience. I've never had been to a virtual conference. The lineup of speakers were also very interesting. Um, but I'd like to get your feedback on what have you heard about the conference and the feedback you received not only from the affiliates but also perhaps visitors and clients and how they felt the conference was took part of? Was it flexible enough? Was it the experience something that they wanted to repeat again if it was needed to be repeated?
Well, lots of questions there. So let me kind of take them one by one, if that's okay.
Sure.
I thought the conference went extremely well. The format, we changed the format from our typical conference. We've had a fairly set format for many years when we've done in-person conferences. And we did a test run about 2 months ago, a pilot seminar, if you will. It was a short one-day conference, but allowed us to test technology and test out different methods of organizing the conference. And we learned a few things from that test run that we incorporated into the conference. We learned that people don't have a high tolerance for longer presentations when it's in a virtual setting. Mm-hmm. They like to have things that are pretty quick, move quickly, and more along the lines of a TED Talk as opposed to a typical conference keynote that we had in the past, which were usually 45 to 50 minutes, add Q&A to it. And you finish maybe at 55 minutes, so you've got a 5-minute switch over to the next keynote at the top of the next hour, right? So we were thinking in terms of hours before, and now what we decided to do, because of our test run and how that worked out, we decided to go with strictly half-hour presentations, 20 to 25 minutes of presentation and 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A. And that worked really well. It kept things going, very lively interaction with the people in the audience and so on. So that was one thing. We changed that format. We also found that we found this with our workshops especially. So we took this over from the 2-day workshops that we were doing, that what people get tired of sitting and looking at a screen for long periods of time. And so we build in enough breaks that we think that allowed everybody to go get the coffee they needed to go get, or go take a bio break or whatever they needed to take care of. So we built in a lot of those things, that more than we would have normally in a live setting, because in a live setting, people can, they can get up and walk around. They can go get a cup of coffee. They can go get some water or whatever, and still be in the conference setting listening to the presenter. Whereas if you're tied to a screen, you can't do that. So we've had to build in more of that. But that's more format questions. So let me move on to content questions. Okay. So format, we think it worked pretty well. I would say the one thing we're disappointed in format is not very many people visited the virtual booths. We had a lot of people that were joining in the keynote sessions, but not as many people who were going out and meeting our affiliates and the other exhibitors that were part of the conference. We've got to figure out a way of how to do that better. So that's one of our points we know we need to improve on. Content, I'll have to tell you, I was really pleased with the quality of the presenters, maybe except for that guy who did the very first presentation on the first day.
Yeah, I don't know who I forgot his name.
Unfortunately, it's a role I have to take every year. I kind of get to be the kickoff keynote speaker, and I try to make it interesting, but it's a tough spot. Yeah. Early in the morning to get everybody awake, and I'm not sure I did a great job of that, but it was fun to have Max kick off and go right after me, because he woke everybody up after I put him to sleep. Yeah. But no, I was pleased. The things I liked was the mixture of different industries. You notice we had several healthcare presenters who talked about how to implement the Shingo model within a healthcare setting, yeah, which might be more relevant to your audience also. Right. And I can share some of the insights I learned from those presentations. I really liked we had a couple of what I would call research presentations, people who are researching and looking and trying to figure out how do we do Kaizen better? How do we make how do we improve the process of improvement, which is what we put in our mission statement. I learn the most from them because they make me think, and they make me think about what can I do to help the people who are using the Shingo model do things better? How can we teach it better? How can we assess it better? How can we help our affiliates coach them better and things like that? And so those are the ones that I personally get the most out of. But I'll tell you the ones that people tell us they love the most, and I'm going to pick on one of the presentations because I thought it really did what most of the people who come to our conference really want to hear, and that's about the detailed journey of somebody who started and then that resulted in receiving the Shingo Prize. And the one that I thought was just absolutely outstanding was the Abbott group, who talked about having different facilities go through that process and why did they apply when they applied, what level were they at, how did the next one that was from Abbott want to do better than the one that just received the Shingo Prize, so that they kind of took the top spot in the company.
Right.
I just, the whole story, I just go, this is really cool. I really enjoyed just hearing their story. And I knew most of that story already.
Right.
But it was great to have them share it with such a broad audience, and they could see, other people could then see that this is something I can do too. This isn't beyond me. This isn't beyond even my organization. I can do something like that. And I think it generates that excitement about going for the prize. And so that's the one that really stood out to me as something that I thought lots of people at the conference would really love to hear. And I think they did. I haven't read all of the reports yet because we give them a few days to get their evaluations back to us. These are all the participants. We asked them to give us feedback. But I suspect the ones like that Abbott one will be the ones that are most highly rated and people will find the most meaningful in their own journey right now.
That's true. I did enjoy the speakers, especially meeting and seeing people like Gwendolyn and Tara Lee's talk was also very, very good. I liked it when she had a talk about respect for every individual, and she really focused that on the Gallo experience, implementing it over there at Gallo Wines. So I really enjoyed several of those presentations. Now, to be fair, as an affiliate, what I found challenging was that the app that was used and some of the limitations that the app had for the exhibitors and to showcase some of the things. I was thinking that I would have the opportunity to do some additional slide videos and or presentations, but it was like either or, right? Either you were streaming live online or you had a video prepared. Yeah. And it was kind of difficult to, I guess there was a break there on understanding the application itself, the app, and the guide that was there was mixed because it had the mobile app explanation together with the desktop app explanation. So when you go to the mobile app, it looks totally different from the desktop app. And you're like, now where do I find this part of it that I saw in the mobile app? I can't find it in the desktop app.
Can't find it in the desktop. Well, and if I understood correctly, so a lot of people commented about not being able to ask questions when they were on the mobile app, yes. Which was one of the biggest technical complaints that we had. And we said, well, get on the Zoom and ask questions there, or we think the desktop app question was worked, but very few people tried it out or gave us feedback on whether it was working or not. So, yeah, I think those kinds of technical issues will improve over time.
Yeah.
I am absolutely sure in the future, even when we are able to go back to an in-person conference, that we will have to have a streaming part of that. So people who can't travel or people who are overseas or whatever will want to be able to join in, but not do it live. They'll want to join in virtually. And so we'll have lots of opportunities to improve the technology, and I don't think the technology is just going to go away. I think it's going to become we're going to be more and more dependent on technology, even when we can do things in person.
It would have been good to see also, while the talks were, people giving their talks, who was online, because we couldn't really see who was online For a minute, it would say you had 150 participants, for example, but you couldn't see who they were because it was not you didn't have that option. But it'll be great to see who's online because sometimes while the talk is going, you could perhaps send one of those Zoom in a one-to-one chat salutations to someone you haven't seen in a long time, and invite them to your booth, or say, hey, let's get some virtual coffee later on. And I think that would have been helpful as well because sometimes they, like it happened to me, you were focused on the conference, you're focused on the talks, on the speakers, and you really didn't have time to go back to the messages to see who was it you missed the messages from, who was on there. So like you said, I know that this is going to improve. This is the first experience. I enjoyed it very, very much, and I look forward to next year's conference, which is going to be in Utah, and look forward to seeing that face to face, right? Having those people and have them.
Yeah. The face-to-face portion will probably be in Utah if we're able to open up by then. But I'm sure a lot of people will be joining us virtually through some sort of a conference app, whether it's Zoom, Huva, or some combination, or something new that comes along that's better, and solve some of the technical issues that you raised. So
overall, it was very, very good, very enlightening, and I enjoyed the experience very, very much.
Yeah, and I'll make sure just a couple of statistics with you. We had 284 people register for the conference. The most we had in any specific keynote session, though, was 194. So we're missing about 90 people all the time, but they come and go. And I think that's another characteristic of a virtual conference is not everybody's going to be at everything all the time.
Correct.
Because you're scheduling other things around it, I guess, or whatever. You just kind of check out of the things you're not interested in. So that's one of those. It's another one of those things that are just part of the virtual world we're going to have to deal with. But we're really pleased with the number of people that came and the people that participated. And like I said, the content was fabulous. The presentations, the technology around the presentations all went really well. And it was more the supplemental technology glitches we had about asking questions or being able to set up meetings with people and things like that. Those were the technical issues. They were all sideline, not main conference issues. So,
and I have to say, I have to give some kudos to Mary Price.
Yep. Mary did an outstanding job lining up the agenda, getting the speakers all ready, and making sure that the key technologies were working, even if some of the supplemental ones weren't.
And she made one thing that she was very instrumental, which was very good, was keeping the flow, right? Keeping the flow going from one speaker to the next speaker, and keeping the time and the questions going. So she kept the flow going very, very, very smooth. And at the same time, I know she was answering emails because I was sending her emails, and she was answering emails at the same time.
And the part you don't know is how many phone calls she got too.
Just imagining. So let her know that kudos for my part on her excellent job during this conference. I know she was juggling a lot of stuff at the same time, but she did a fantastic job. And I know I wouldn't want that job. That was very difficult.
And I find my life goes better, especially around conference, if I do what Mary tells me to do. and if I do that, then life is good.
I have to agree.
You know what I mean?
With that. I have to agree with that. Let's just jump into our second topic, and this one that it's more on my side here, and I want to share with our listeners and with you as part of the Shingo Institute. As you know, the guiding principle is working on a humanitarian project in a small city that's called Barranca Bermeja, and this is in Colombia, South America. And Barranca is nested in a very center of Colombia. It's a petrol city, like Houston. So their main business there is petrol. And the company is called Ecopetrol. And it's what generates most of the revenue for the city. It's an American-based company, it's Colombian-owned. but there's a lot of Americans on there, of course, like Shell and other people that work there and have interest in the petrol industry over there. The interesting part about this project is that the hospital that we're working on, it's a 300 bed hospital. It has 380 employees, and COVID has pretty much hit very hard in Colombia. As a matter of fact, they're still under quarantine. They've taken off the quarantine, they've put it on, and it's affected their business, of course. But when it comes to having the needs of the hospital met because of the COVID, it has been a huge challenge, and because of the people's cultural behaviors and not protecting themselves, the COVID has also taken more of a high peak at this point now. Um, and sad part is that put people unfortunately put names to things that they don't really understand. So, for example, this hospital they gave it the name the Hospital of Death, and not because they're killing people. It's because of how COVID has impacted severely the city, and when people go there, the survival rate is very low. Of course, before that, the hospital has a lot of internal processes and cultural issues that had to be addressed. So our challenge was, how do we go in remotely, virtually, and implement and deploy Shingo? And we know that this is a 3 year engagement, 3 to 5 year engagement. How do we introduce Shingo to a culture and a country and a people in a different language, a different totally culture, and have absolutely zero knowledge of things like Lean or Six Sigma? And whatever they do know is very limited. And now introduce a whole new terminology, right? Shingo with all the model and the principles and so forth. So that was our biggest question, our biggest challenge. So we started to work on formalizing the best path of how to get this. First of all, we know tools were not the first path. Introducing tools like Lean and getting them to do 5S's, 8 waste, and other things that have to do with Kanbans and things like that were not going to help. It was going to confuse them, frustrate them. They're not going to get it right or understand it right off the bat. And some of these things is best done on site, where you could actually walk with them and do it with them as you do it. So that was not going to be a good option. And second of all, introducing something as complicated as DMAIC or Six Sigma was going to be even more complicated. A3s or the PDSAs, for example, also going to be a little complicated of how to manage projects and how to manage organizations. So what was our path? Well, I remember I had worked on some projects in the past in healthcare using innovation and design. And one of the things that I learned when working on these projects was that there was something that's called the empathy path, right? Where you take the person with you and you go through this path and you make them live the life of the other person. So they have that empathy feeling of what's going on. So my approach was, what if we were to take the employees of the hospital and have them go through the empathy path of patients and let them understand why patients were so frustrated, why was the city and the town and the people of the town calling this hospital the hospital of death. And then we did some random gambas, more like interview gambas, more than anything else. So we have somebody on the ground, and this person would go and do a physical gamba of what's just her observing the clinic and its operations in general, walking through the floors, everything outside of COVID, nothing that was COVID related, just in general, in the general hospital area. How they, the emergency room, how that worked, how people were um, uh, got into the system to see the doctor, if it was an appointment, or if it was an illness, if it was pediatrics, maternity, etc. And then we went outside. Then we could There were people outside waiting. So not only did they have a waiting room, which was packed with people, but also there was a line outside of people trying to get in to the hospital. So we went outside and started doing a Gemba interview with them. And we recorded some of these interviews. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot by hearing the voice of the customer, in this case, the patients, right? And a lot of them were family members. Some of them were patients, but most of them were family members that had patients in the hospital. Not all of them were related to COVID. Some were just simple, things like appointments or doctors. And one of the things that a common theme that we found throughout the entire Gemba process was how doctors treat patients. The doctor's philosophy or culture, I would say, in Colombia is that I'm the doctor. I know more than you. Don't question my tactics or my diagnostics or how I'm going to treat you. You just accept it, and if you misbehave, I will not give you a follow up appointment, or I will not give you a medication, or it's some kind of retaliation if you were to raise any type of doubt or questioning the doctors. So people pretty much have to go with the flow and be submissive more than being a patient that was had that open dialogue between doctors and patient. That was one aspect that was pretty stuck out pretty much. The second aspect was information. Sometimes family members would go to either the front desk, go to the nurse's desk, go to whoever they saw may have information, and would ask, my family members here, where are they? Can I see them? What's the status? And the answer was, I don't know. I don't know. Go here, go there, pointing, fingers everywhere. And patients were extremely frustrated to the point that, at the screaming level. And we have some of these things that we taped as well. So that was our first stage. Our second stage is now, how do we get the staff to understand what the problem is, what's going on culturally? So remember, the Shingo model is focused on culture and behaviors. Of course, we have the principles. And of course, then we haven't touched systems or tools yet, but we needed to really reach the heart. And since culture is the heart of the Shingo model, we said, let's try to get to the heart of them as a hospital clinic, get to their heart, and see how we can let them see what we're seeing, but without being critical, without being criticizing them or putting them down. That was a big challenge. So what we decided to do was have them do gembas. So we put them into different groups, and we said we're going to do various types of gembas. We did a departmental gemba. So you're going to go to that department. You're going to observe what that department does, and you're going to see the systems that are used, the tools that are used, and then you're going to ask. We're going to come back. We're going to do a reflection, and you're going to reflect on what behaviors are driving her type of her work. So this was a nursing manager who was hiring nurses, and her structure for hiring nurses was very, let's just call it almost like military, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then she would scratch out those who she didn't feel like met her criteria, not really the criteria of the position or of the clinic. So when the team came back and noticed that, they noticed that we should be looking really at people as individuals, and not just what their qualifications are and what regulations are required for them to qualify to be a nurse, but we should look at them as individuals versus as a qualification entity. So the idea came that to ask some empathy questions like, what got you into nursing? What is it you like about nursing? Tell me an experience that you had that was pleasurable, and tell me an experience that was difficult for you. What is the challenging part of nursing that you like about it, that really teaches you something new every day? So these types of interview questions were never asked. It's basically, do you have your certification? Do you have your documentation? Are you up to date with your stuff, etc.? And introducing this type of empathy, more of let's get to know you personally before getting hired, was a total cultural shift for them, a total evolution from what they were before. And I would say a revolution as well, because now they have to think differently. And we put them down, we put down these questions, we wrote them down, and they were able to put this into practice. And we said, this is not a solution. And we kept on saying this. The Gemba is not, we're not doing the Gembas to find solutions. We're doing the Gemba to understand what's going on. Let's doing this empathy, understand what is that we're observing. So it's not finger pointing. It's not whose fault it is. It's not you're doing this wrong. You're doing that right. It's to observe, listen, ask questions, come back, and reflect. And then what do we learn of that reflection? Okay, and then what does that say about me? And when I say me, I mean individually in each person that was in the Gemba, and what do I have to do? And again, this is individually to do to change the culture, to be a contributor to change culture, and the behaviors to change as well. The second we just completed our third Gemba, and this Gemba was interesting. We did this on yesterday, and this was having them do the Gemba on the outside of interviewing patients. So we had three groups. We had one group go to the waiting room. We had one group go to the outside, like we had, and then we had one group go to the patients that were in the hospital, that were in maternity or in pediatrics or any other area that was non-COVID related, that went to the interviews. And we had everyone, we had a big, large group. We had people from housekeeping, we had people from the kitchen, we had people from the laundry, we had, of course, doctors and nurses participate in this. We had maintenance, we had security details, guards that, security shift, I would say, that manages the security doing this. And when they went and did this Gemba, and when they came back to do reflection, immediately the first thing that came out of their expressions, their reflections was, resentment. Right now, these people don't understand. These people are yelling at us. They're screaming at us. They don't understand that we're a hospital, that we have work to do, that we're busy. And one of the comments that I made to them was, remember one thing: we are all patients. Today it's them. Tomorrow it could be your mom, your brother, your sister, your son, your daughter. It could be you. And if it were you as the patient, how would you be under those conditions? Okay, how would you react? So that got them to reflect and really sit back and say it's true, right? We need to change as a culture. So, and then I gave some scenarios of examples of what if for example it existed, because one comment was that there's, since Colombia, there's a lot of regional, different types of region and different types of people. You got indigenous people that still live in Colombia, that live literally in the mountains, and they are indigenous. They are Indians, and they come from a totally different culture. They speak differently. They have a different way of dealing with things. Their education level is different as well. So they'll come and and they see something, they'll react to it, towards their own culture, as the way they always do. So the thing is it, where's the problem? Is it the people? Can we change the whole population of the country? Or is it us, that was only 300 of us, that we can change the culture internally and not try to understand the culture and the behaviors that we're having, so that then we could have better results? So the conclusion was that as a hospital, culturally, we need to change, and they identified some areas of improvement where they saw that that the Gemba was very, very useful. So using a lean tool, very simple. This one was the Gemba, but at the same time using a different strategy, which was using the empathy path as an innovation. was able to reach a point where we're able to now break the ice of the Shingo complexity, because Shingo is complex for some for a country and a people that have never heard of anything of this type of improvement before, and it broke it down to something that's very, very simple, tangible. If I do my gambas and I listen to people and I reflect and I do that with my teams, I can change the culture and the behaviors of my teams. That's the first step. Of course, now we're going to look into systems. Our next Gemba is set up for next week. And now we're going to start looking at systems. We're going to do a Gemba on systems. And we're just going to focus on the different systems, observe the different systems that are out there, and do some reflections. Now, no list of projects or priorities or of who should fix what, or that none of that is being done, and that's not what we want to get to at this point. The whole idea is to change the heart first and change the mindset so that everything else will be more receptive. Now they'll see the reason, and like we like Dr. Shingo said, they know the why. Now they will know the why we're doing this, because they're experiencing it, they're living it, and now they understand why Shingo is important, why we're doing Shingo, why is it that we need to change our culture and our behaviors, and how is it that these systems and these tools are impacting and contributing to some of the behaviors that we have internally. So it's working. It's working very, very good. Of course, it's taking time, and that's what we want. We want them to take their time. He said, there's no rush. There's 3 years of engagements that we have to work with you, and we have to evolutionize ourselves and revolutionize our practices, and get rid of the old stuff, get rid of that old mentality, old cultural things that made the hospital have that even name, and now introduce a new name, and it'll be La Clínica Magdalena's de Excelencia. So it'll be an excellence after its name, and they really like that. They like that now the new name that they want to strive for, it has excellence at the end of it, and that have that personal pride that they're working towards excellence. And as we mature, we'll be going into much more deeper deployment issues, and introducing some of the lean tools, of course, and doing some other housekeeping things that will help move along the project at a much more advanced level. But being this a humanitarian project, and the first one in South America, and with a culture that started from literally zero and everything, zero knowledge, zero experience, and zero background on anything that's to do with lean and any of these concepts. I think we've come a long way in the last 3 months. The first thing how we measure that is acceptance. We have more and more people participating in our meetings now. We started off with 4 people, now we have like 15. Second of all is management approval. We have the president of the hospital and all of his leadership team on board. So we've had several leadership presentations on Shingo, of the Shingo model, with the entire staff, with everyone, all the coordinators, supervisors, managers, leaders, and vice presidents. And we've done several iterations of the Shingo model with them. And repeated it with them, and they've every time we do that, they've learned more and more about it, and we're glad to do that. And the third piece about it is acknowledgement. So now they're understanding the why of Shingo. Why is it we're doing this? Why is it important? That it's not something. It's not a passe project that we just pulled out of a hat. Let's do this. Let's try it. If it doesn't work, well, we didn't lose anything. They're understanding why that it's important, so that at the end of the day, at the end of this project term that we're projecting, that who knows, we might be able to qualify for one of the Shingo prizes for recognition as excellence, because they were putting into practicing it for the last 3 to 4 years. And that's the goal. That's the vision that we're putting out there, and that's the goal that we're putting out there. And I think that so far it's going really good. I through this podcast, I'll be keeping the listeners up to date on the status of this, and letting them know how we're doing, and also sharing some of the ideas that we've used to implement the Shingo model in a scenario like this one. Of course, everyone has a different format of implementing it at their locations, and then it also depends on the industry, depends on the maturity level, depends on the knowledge or experience that the staff has and the capabilities. But I think it really depends on the leadership availability, leadership participation, and providing the time to take people off the floor from a hospital that has 50%, 50 to 60% of the hospital is COVID. It's covering COVID patients, and still make time enough to do these exercises and to do this in the middle of a pandemic crisis, and to add to that, the COVID spike is getting higher again in this part of Colombia. So besides all those things that go against us, to have a project, to make time for this project, and to be enthusiastic about it, at the same time, to give us the support, I think is a win-win in itself. It tells a story on itself about it. So I'll keep you, Ken, and the Shingo Institute up to date on how this is going. I think it's an interesting story in itself. It's unique. I'm pretty sure there are other, here in the U.S. There's much more. They're bigger hospitals, and there's also much more, many more engineers that can work with people when it comes to Lean and Six Sigma. But one thing about this hospital, which is unique versus the hospitals here in the U.S., many hospitals here in the U.S., many that I've worked in healthcare for a long time, have this. It's almost like two heads, right? You have the administrative, the C level, CEO, CFO, COO level, and then you have the clinical leadership, right? The CMO, CNO level. So they're all covering everything that has to do with the clinicians, and they have both different strategies. They have both different types of management styles, and they both have different types of end results that they're looking for. Um, in the La Magdalena Hospital, it's all one. It's all focused on the one leadership, which is great. So you don't have that split. And second of all, you also have everyone working towards one goal. So it's not, you don't have, when talking about, aligning to the system, or aligning, focusing on a process, some of these principles that we have in Shingles that really align. And healthcare is very difficult in the U.S., especially with a huge healthcare hospital, when you have these two entities working at the same time. So some people will work only on the administrative side and use Shingle for the administrative side of the hospital, and some will work on the clinical side of the Shingle model. Um, but being able to work with both sides at once and using the Shingle model for both sides, I think is very unique as well. And I think once we finish with, as we keep along the updates, I'll let everyone know how we are progressing along. So that was the update that I wanted to share with you on that. What's your feedback on that, Ken?
Well, I don't know the specifics of the Magdalena Hospital in Colombia, other than what you just stated and what you've told me otherwise. I visit a lot of hospitals now virtually, because we're not visiting anything in live, especially hospitals nobody's allowed in for the most part anywhere in the country. But I'm on an advisory board for a local hospital group, and I am on a board of directors for Catalysis, which is the Lean Healthcare network organization. And I get a chance to talk to hospital administrators, both on the clinician side or medical side, but also on the administrative side, rather frequently. I probably I spend almost as much time in healthcare as I do in manufacturing, and I have a fairly broad reach in terms of resources. I'll give you a couple of thoughts, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thought number one is, and the last numbers I saw are now about a month old, and I haven't seen anything since then, but over 80,000 healthcare workers in the US have caught the virus at work.
Correct.
Which means to me that generally most healthcare organizations are not doing a good job of keeping their people safe. If we were to say 80,000 people got hurt on the job in their manufacturing plants when they were building product for somebody, we would say that's atrocious. OSHA's not doing their job, and there'd be an outcry. Why isn't there a similar outcry over 80,000 people who should be safe at work, but who are not safe at work? And I think that in healthcare, what we have seen, and this is true everywhere else as well, but especially true in healthcare, if the people don't feel safe, the people will not be engaged in improvement. They will. You can do any exercise you want. You can try to roll out any tool you want. You can try to teach them Shingo principles, anything you want. If they do not feel safe, they do not get past the "I do not feel safe in this workplace"
Very good
problem. And safety literally has to be first in order for improvement to be effective in a healthcare setting. And perhaps that's something they've solved at the hospital in Colombia, but it's something that a lot of the hospitals and other healthcare organizations throughout North America are still struggling with.
Yes.
Some of them are doing an outstanding job, and even through the very, very worst part of the pandemic have kept their healthcare providers safe and have done a tremendous job with that, and others have been miserable failures.
Correct.
And they need to improve. They've simply got to get better. They're not going to be effective as a healthcare institution without keeping their people safe. So that's kind of the first point. The second point I would make is the better people get at doing, and I never have liked this word, but I'll use it again anyway, lean in hospital. The better people get at understanding the principles and understand what tools to use when, because they understand the principles.
Correct.
The better they can deal with crises like this. And if there's healthcare people out there who want to know how they can deal with crises like this better, they need to understand the Shingo model better. They need to know the lean tools better. As they understand it better, they can manage it all better. They can respond more quickly. They can take more effective action. They can get everybody on board, and you don't have people not being part of the solution, if you will. But I've seen so many good examples of quick response, doing great work because they already had the pieces in place to make it happen.
That is very true. And I do have to take my hat off to the Clínica Magdalena with regards to their clinical staff safety. I think you hit it on a nail. They have a very, very, very strict safety protocols and sanitation as well. Everything is cleaned and sanitized. Even the uniforms, the laundry department cleans the uniforms for the nurses and doctors, everybody that's in the COVID area, and in general, and sanitizes everything. So they and everybody inside the hospital also is wearing masks and gloves and taking the correct precautions to, even though they're not in the COVID area that's closed off. In general, the entire hospital has taken this extremely very, very seriously. So I 100%, and that's one thing I have to take my hat off. I think that we here in the U.S. need to be a little bit more conscientious of understanding the seriousness of protection, right? And
Yes.
I think in general that's a good call. And thanks for sharing that experience as well. I mean, that's fantastic. And we'll continue this type of conversation in our next podcast in the future because I think there's much more to go into. Our last topic is pretty. It's a little bit controversial. We have a few minutes for this one, and I know it's something that I've been very passionate about, and it's diversity, inclusion, and HR. And I've always had I don't want to say a confusion. I want to say a conflict with how this is structured. Interesting enough, I did an exercise and I went through LinkedIn and I looked at all the diversity inclusion positions that are at the executive level. So they would say like executive chief diversity officer, for example, or chief inclusion or chief people officer. And I took 10 um, companies that had these announcements and I tried to look for a common theme. Interesting enough, a lot of them had requirements like 10 years of experience in diversity inclusion, which is interesting because diversity inclusion for me has been really new. And then having KPIs on diversity and inclusion, which in HR I haven't seen any KPIs that have to do with any type of diversity inclusion in the past that I know of anyway. And other types of how they were to expected to provide some results on diversity and inclusion when this is something when the EEOC had already published years ago that there shouldn't be a diversity and inclusion issue, right? There's no discrimination against race, religion, and sex, and so on and so forth. Why do we even need or have a diversity and inclusion position that's open, that's needed? Why do we need to have a consciousness of it? And then I took it a little bit further and I did a little an assessment of the EEOC statistics. And from 2000 to 2019, the EEOC had to pay out because of retaliation, because of diversity inclusion, apart from sexual harassment. Retaliation was number one, and paid out $2.4 billion, okay, in payouts. And these were for accusations that had no merit, according to the investigation. So which means that someone made a complaint. Um, the EOC investigated. They said that there was no fault at the company, but still at the end of the day, they had to pay. They had to pay because of the damage that was done. So the question is, why does HR and diversity and inclusion let it get that far? Let it get to the point that there is a lawsuit that it has to go to the EOC. Why is it that that system is broken? That when something is not working out right, there's more accountability on the leadership side to say, why are we having turnarounds? I know one place that hires 100 people every week and they have a new hire employee orientation every week. This is a place that has over 20,000 employees and hires 100 people for the same position every week. So what happens to the other 100 people that were there last week? Why are they hiring for the same position every week? So, of course, the business practices, HR practices, and inclusion practices, and complaints and practices of retaliation is very, very high. And this is not including other things that have to do with other types of discrimination, uh, because of sex or religion, or which are very, very low. The second highest was sexual harassment, and the EEOC was talking about other. If we remember a couple of years ago, a year or so ago, and it wasn't too long ago, we had all these big, corporate leaders and actors and people that were on the media, people like Bill Cosby, etc., that were accused, right, of sexual harassment or abuse. So apart from that type of abuse, which is very high, retaliation was number one on the list. So my question to you is, why do we still have this type of problems? Why is HR such a broken system? And if it's a broken system, can a company uh, call itself a organizational excellence company when it has this type of culture and this type of behavior?
So your last question is the easiest to answer, so I'll answer that one first. No, you can't have organizational excellence unless you are engaging all of the people. And all of the people means all of the diverse backgrounds of all of the different people. And you simply can't accomplish it without including everybody. I'll address the HR question as at least a department or a function within an organization last. But let me just go to the core of the issue. I think is we have a Shingo guiding principle of respect to every individual, and all too often we don't follow that principle, and there are consequences. A principle to us, and we follow the definitions and guidance provided by Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who we think did the best work in the area of guiding principles of anyone out there. And Covey defines a principle as something that is universal, meaning it's true everywhere. It's true in Colombia, it's true in the United States, it's true in Europe, it's true anywhere in the world. It's timeless. And that means it's true 2,000 years ago, it's true 2,000 years from now. It does not change.
Correct.
And it's true everywhere. And the third thing that Covey taught is there's a consequence to following the principle and a consequence of not following the principle. And if let's go to the key principle again, respect every individual. What we still see in a lot of organizations, or most organizations, is you respect certain people, but you don't respect other people. And it may be something that's based upon race. It may be something based on educational background. It may be something based upon gender. It might be, there could be lots of reasons why some people are respected and some people are not. But the fact is you cannot get everybody engaged in improving the organization unless they are respected. Safety is one of those key areas where everybody has to feel safe in order to become engaged. And that's not just physical safety, like we talked about with the pandemic, it's emotional and psychological safety too. If somebody's going to bring up a suggestion on how to improve something, and every time they bring something up, the boss yells at them, that is not psychologically safe. And you've got to have psychological, emotional, and physical safety for people to be engaged. And what happens when you discriminate against some group or some individuals, what happens is that poisons everything. Everybody wonders, what's the motivation here? It's not, if they're not respecting this person, why are they respecting me? Even the people that get the respect question why they're getting the respect, because they question the motives of the person who is not respecting someone else and wonder, when is it going to be me?
Right.
And you just can't draw lines like that and expect people to not be worried about them. They will be worried about them. And because they are worried about them, they're thinking about that instead of thinking about how to make the organization better.
Absolutely.
Okay? It precludes all activities that would go towards improving the organization. So if you do not follow the principle of respect every individual, you are damaging the opportunity for your company to get better. It's just something you can't change until you start respecting everybody. Correct. And that means everybody. It doesn't mean you exclude anyone. It means everybody. Now, what we have seen in the Shingo prize recipient organizations pretty much across the board is they find that they have to proactively make sure people understand how to go about respecting every individual. And so they develop programs around helping people understand things like intrinsic bias, things that most people don't even think they might be doing, but they're actually doing in terms of showing some favoritism towards one group or towards another. And so they not only have this respect for every individual, but they have proactively gone after this potential ways where people might feel bias because of the way other people are acting, who may not be intentionally doing it, but are ignorantly following just a habit that may be something that reemphasizes that bias, if you will. And so the best organizations not only respect every individual from a policy or whatever point of view, but they go about trying to break down the barriers that might be influencing any kind of bias so that everybody will feel respected. And so I'll put that, and then let me go to the HR question. HR in the best organizations we see, HR is an active participant in the improvement process. And in many cases, HR has taken the role of people development, and they apply the lean principles, the guiding principles, to the development of people. Meaning we create a value stream. We want to have people that are contributing significantly in the long run. And so we choose the right kind of people. We put the right kind of onboarding program in place. We put the right kind of long-term training program in place. We put the right kind of skill development opportunities in place and watch them grow as they continue their path through the organization. HR is the only organization who can be in that role because they have the opportunity to look at different opportunities throughout the whole organization. Yes, you can do that if you've got a production facility, you can move in different places, but still you've got people just within production. Only HR has that overarching opportunity to look at skill development from an organizational wide perspective. And we've seen a number of really great organizations who have taken on that challenge of people development being one of the most important priorities of the organization. And in that, you can't do that and do it right unless you are respecting every individual. So the role of HR is clear. Their role is to develop everybody and show respect to everybody by giving them the opportunities to grow and develop. And everybody else in the organization is part of that. They're part of the training program. They're part of the people development and helping them identify their next opportunities and things like that. So if we start with that principle of respect every individual, there's a lot of implications that come along with that, but a lot of really great consequences, because what happens when you get everybody engaged and everybody working towards a higher purpose and everybody feels like they are valued, they want to get up in the morning, they want to go to work, they want to engage their mind and not just their hands. When you get there, you have a really powerful opportunity to grow people, but also do great things in the world.
I agree 100%. And one thing that when I went to OC Tanner and I had one of the trainings there, and I asked, interviewed some of the employees, the turnaround rate there is extremely low, almost, like 0.0 something. People that are there for the long haul. And when you stop anyone in the hallways or on the production line, they're always smiling, first of all. They feel very, very valued, and they feel engaged in all, not just in their daily production work, but also in the training process, in the educational process, the cross training process as well, and they feel part of the organization. So I know that OC Tana now has its own HR excellence academy, if you will, that they're promoting to other companies, to teach other companies how to make HR much more efficient, because it's a gap. It's a gap that exists in many companies, because although they do cover the gambit, like you mentioned, of the employee on all of its educational progress and its engagement in the organization. The problem that is not addressed is when there's a need for a mediator or someone to come in and resolve a solution. Now, again, following the principles, if you have leadership that are leading with humility, right, and have respect to every individual, you probably won't even have this type of issues with needing HR as a mediator, because leaders will be doing their jobs, right? They'll be accessible, they'll be available. They'll also be humble enough that you can express what you need, what your concerns are, and you won't have this retaliation because of you expressing it, right? Like the EOC has been reporting. So again, I think it starts with leadership. Again, forming the culture, and being out there and providing itself that vulnerability to let people have ask questions and at sometimes make critiques. Right? This could be better if I need help with this or types of questions that would allow that the process continue to be more productive. So I agree 100% with you. I think that this was a very productive conversation. I really enjoyed it. Um, I think this is going to be the closing arguments for our conversation, our podcast for today. I enjoyed very much speaking with you, Ken. It was very enlightening, as always, very enlightening. And I invite you again later on, hopefully soon, for another engaging conversation. For our next podcast that we're having planned for December, we're going to have a special guest, and she is the CEO of CJ Jung Consulting. Her name is Dr. Cindy Young, and she's a knowledge management expert. And right now she's in the UK. Hopefully, if she gets back, we're going to present her. And the topic that we have is why do we need knowledge management in the Shingo model, and how to apply it. So of course, knowledge management is important, and she gives some very good insights of how to apply knowledge management within the Shingo model, which of course is very, very valuable. Again, thank you, Ken, for your
Carlos, thanks for having me. It's always fun.
and here from the guiding principles and the Evolution Revolution radio station. We want to thank everybody for participating. We hope to see you guys soon again. And remember, the guiding principles were leading cultural evolution through behavior revolution. That's what we're here for. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.